First story. My wife cheated on me with my coworker in our bed after telling me she was going to therapy for our marriage. So, I took our kids and left. Now, she accuses me of harming our kids and worries that I'll ruin her affair partner's career, which I will. But what hurts me the most is that she doesn't give an SHT about our relationship being over. Long post. There is a lot to tell, but I got to let this one out as it played out in my head. I 37M and my wife Cass 32F were married in 2018. We met a few years before that through business because we are in the same industry. I love her more than everything. The reason I married her was because I had major turmoil in my life, and she stuck with me. We had a small break before we got back together. When we started talking again, I found out my father was indicted in a cold case murder. He was going to jail. The terrible part is that my father had custody of my nephew L 4 months. At this time, I was the only family member able to take him on because my brother was currently in jail. Through this, she said we would do this together. I knew I wanted to marry her right then. My wife was told she was more than likely not going to be able to have kids, but I wanted to marry her anyway because of how much I loved her. I always wanted to be a dad, but was willing to sacrifice that because of how much I loved her. During this terrible time, I wanted something solid. We were best friends and have made it through so much. I felt like we could tackle the world together. I asked her to marry me on a weekend, and then we found out she was miraculously pregnant the following week. We went from talking again to a family in no time. Looking back, I wanted to have a long engagement to make sure we worked through any issues from our break, but instead we were thrown right in. We were married in 2018, and everything was great. I loved her very much, and our marriage wasn't perfect, but I was loyal to her, and she was my ride or die. Fast forward to 2021. We moved states because I had to take a new job because our business was derailed by COVID. This new job required me to travel a lot, and she wanted to be close to her family for help with our 3 kids. We had 2 beautiful girls on top of my nephew. Cass quit her last job and worked locally with her family. She hated being home because her family was full of constant judgment and asking. When help was needed from them, it was like pulling teeth. It honestly pulled us down and reminded her why she left the first time. Her old employer asked for her back. But this job was 4 hours away, and without really discussing it extensively like a couple should, it required her to be gone during the week. She was going to work this into a remote position, but as she started the job, she started to like being away. She left me to take care of the kids, and I love them, but it was hard. I felt abandoned. I still traveled 2 days a week and had to rely on and deal with her family. Not to mention all of the duties of taking care of 3 kids. She would come home on weekends, and it would be fight after fight. I wanted and needed help, but when she came home, she would hardly want to hang out with us, but instead go out with her brother and friends. All I wanted was help. The business we are in is primarily male. She started being distant, and we were hardly as cool anymore. Last summer, we moved to where she was working. Her time there changed her. She is a beautiful, tall blonde, and is constantly getting hit on by her male coworkers and customers. She had a coworker named Seth 33, whom I knew from being in the same industry. I liked him. I never felt threatened by him because all my dealings with him have been good. He put out there that he was a moral man, as far as I could tell. I did not feel threatened, for he was not Cass's type. After we moved, I tried everything I could to make Cass happy, listening, emotionally supportive, and complimenting. I bared any household task to try to make an effort to not prevail. What I did was never good enough. We finally got to a point where we both agreed that therapy was our best option. We agreed on individual therapy first. She found an online therapist, which I thought wasn't the best, but it was what she wanted to do. One day, she asked what my plans were for later in the week. I told her I didn't have to travel and would be working from home. She asked if I could work at a coffee shop that day because she wanted space. She wanted to work home that day and had a therapy session. I said sure. We have always shared our location for safety. A few times in recent weeks, her location would randomly turn off. She said it was an issue with her phone. The day she had her session in the afternoon, she made sure my location was working and called me to make sure. I felt it was suspicious. I asked her if everything was okay, and she said yes. I turned off my location, and 15 minutes before her session, she asked why it wasn't working. I told her my phone must have the same issues as hers. She asked if I was still in the coffee shop, and I said yes. She said I could come back in 2 hours. My spider sense went off. I left the coffee shop as I could see her location was not at the house. I drove back and parked down the street. 5 minutes later, I saw Seth and Cass both get out and walk into the house. It was obvious that she wasn't going to therapy. I waited for 10 minutes as my heart was beating uncontrollably, and the thought of what I would find in there and how it would ruin me. But I had to know. I walked in, and no one was in the living room. There is no reason a man that Cass works with should be in any other room. I made it to our bedroom and opened the door to find them both about to do the deed. He was butt naked on my bed, with her almost there. I looked at her and yelled, "Is this a new type of therapy?" Both of them had utter shock in their faces. She ran after me, trying to say it wasn't what it looked like. I broke down. I didn't cry, but my body and mind took over, and my world was turned upside down. Seth exited as quick as he could as Cass made sure she was between us. I tried to leave, but Cass was physically blocking me. I'm traditional in the sense that I would never physically hurt a woman. But a relentless version of Cass came out. All I wanted to do was leave. I was a former defensive lineman and used my old moves to evade her without having to get physical. Once I got to my car, she blocked me from leaving. In order to leave, I had to trick her into thinking I wanted to talk. But I sprinted to the car and took off. I think she broke a nail trying to grab the door handle as I was speeding away. I'm flushed with anxiety. I don't understand how she could have done this. All I did was try to make her happy. The picture of that man naked on my bed is haunting me after he tries so hard to come off as a good man. I still have to process this. Update. I would like to thank Reddit and the community. Everyone here has been so supportive, and I've given great advice. While I was driving away, I probably should have pulled over at some point because I was hyperventilating and couldn't get my heart rate down. However, the first thing I thought of were my kids. I immediately drove to their school and picked them up. At this point, I was getting bombarded with calls and text messages from her. I decided to block her. My only thought of the situation was, where are my kids, and are they going to be okay? Even with what I just saw, I was still thinking about what was best for them, under my supervision and control. I could make sure that they were okay. I needed them now more than her, and she could spend the weekend by herself, wallowing in what she had done. Once I got the kids, I drove to a family member 2 hours away. This happened on a Friday, and I was able to take a weekend and have time with just me and my kids. During this drive, I started to get calls from her mother, and she was our mediator. The only thing I told her to say was that the kids were safe. I told her not to share anything else about our situation or where we were going. It was Cass's choice to break up the family, and I felt she didn't warrant that information. The mother-in-law agreed and told Cass that the kids were safe. I was emotionally dead inside. The only thing that brought out positivity were the kids. We did a bunch of activities over the weekend and had a great time together. They wondered where their mom was. I told them that this was a weekend for Daddy to spend time with them. I still wanted to put Cass in a positive light and not be spiteful to their mother. Kids eventually make up their own minds. I found out later that she was worried because of the emotional state that I was in, and that it would somehow hurt the kids. It goes to show how much she really doesn't know me anymore, because I would never do anything like that. I started to see some of the dialogue that she was putting out there in order to sway certain opinions. To add context, though I loved her very much and wanted to make her happy, she had narcissistic qualities about her. When I was sick, she would have been more sick. I had a problem. Her problem had to be bigger. Cass decided to adopt my nephew with me, but I believe that this was a tactic to lock me down. At that point in my life, I was very successful and had a lot of good qualities that I believe someone else would want to find. During our break, she realized this and saw it as an opportunity. Due to my upbringing, I have some insecurities about myself. But from what other people have said, they think that I am a good person and always try to make everything better. That's always who I try to be. I'm not trying to say I'm perfect or that I didn't have my problems or issues. I most certainly did. But I always tried to make everyone and everything better. My nephew became a problem for her. Since we jumped into being a family after finding out that she was pregnant and adopting him at the same time, I believe she had some animosity because some of her life was stolen from her. Their relationship was always rocky. He was never right in anything that he did. I think that he has some underlying issues now because of their relationship. I was constantly having to defend him for just being a kid. He did have some issues that I do believe were valid, and we got him the appropriate care. When you get a kid into the mental health system, it's always slow and rocky because everything is trial and error for kids so young. I did my best to see all sides of the situation, but it didn't matter, and I was usually stuck in the middle. To give you an update on Seth, he is married and has a few kids. He does work in the industry. I am not sure what I'm going to do yet. I still can't help but think of the person that he put off and find him in my bed like that. I do know that he has blocked me on all social media, so I'm assuming that he's doing damage control to make sure that his wife doesn't find out. However, after 10 minutes in the car before I walked in, I found out a way to contact her for a worst-case scenario. The power of completely ruining somebody scares me. But if that's the right thing to do, then that's what I will do. Ruining somebody has its advantages and disadvantages, but seeing him potentially get away with this is also going to be tough to do. I would also like to let everyone know that, for my own benefit and to protect myself, I did record the whole situation on my phone. I have watched it numerous times, and I know that's not the right thing to do, but I'd rather have all the pain right now than linger later. I have unblocked my wife and have had very limited contact, as I told her I don't really want to talk this way. I let her talk to the kids on the phone so she could let them know that they were missed. I'm planning on having a face-to-face meeting with her and writing down everything that I have an issue with and letting her know that. A lot of you were saying just take it to a lawyer, and I think that is ultimately what's going to happen. However, I believe this one-on-one is going to give me closure and a direction moving forward. The other piece of advice that a lot of you have given is to get a paternity test on my kids. I can say with the utmost certainty that these are my children. They look just like me. The timelines check out. We have the same birthmark between the three of us, and the color of our hair isn't something that could be questioned. In the beginning, I truly believed that she did love me or loved the idea of me. I don't believe that she would have screwed that up. But just for all of our sakes, I still might do the test to leave no stone unturned. Some of my close friends who have given me great advice in the past have told me that I'm doing the right thing by not acting rash. With the video, I could totally ruin her and Seth. But what would I do to my kids? Regardless, I am going to be able to put some stipulations on how we move forward, one way or another. And I'm trying to figure out what those are. I'm not trying to get back with her. I'm trying to find the best way to move forward for our kids. I will post another update following this conversation. Update 2. I'd like to thank the Reddit community again for the additional advice they've given me on top of what they gave me after my first update. I'm going to use some of this. I have many people calling me simp because I didn't react emotionally. But I always found the best revenge to be methodical and with a lot of thought. I finally had a sit down with Cass. Both she and Seth have gone into defense, trying to protect themselves as much as they possibly can. I have the upper hand and also know exactly what I'm going to do. First off, I did an at-home paternity test. Both of the children are indeed mine. There was some doubt based on what the Reddit community was saying, but I got the truth. When I arrived at the house, the first thing that Cass wanted to do was give me a hug. I denied her. She doesn't get to keep playing on my emotions anymore. I honestly felt nothing as she began to cry. I wanted the upper hand in a conversation, so I let her go first. She began by telling me how sorry she was, and how she couldn't get an image of my face when I walked in on her with Seth. She said she had time to reflect on all of the good things I did recently and realized that she was going in a different direction in her head, no matter what I did. The situation has made her realize what she did by having me as a partner. We haven't been intimate as of late, and she told me that she convinced Seth that this would be a one-time thing to see if she could be intimate with somebody else. She wanted to make sure that it wasn't just her and her emotional state that explained why she couldn't be emotionally and physically intimate with me. I didn't believe this for 1 second. She knew I had the video and asked me what I was going to do with it. With us being in the same industry, there were a lot of implications that could happen. It would ruin their reputations. There, I realized what she was saying earlier was a ploy. Cass's having those narcissistic tendencies made me realize that's what she was worried about the whole time. And so goes my plan. I relayed to her that I don't believe her, and actions speak louder than words. Her asking what I was going to do with the video told me what she was really worried about. She asked me not to implicate Seth in his job because he had a family. It was her decision, and she convinced him to bring him over and test to see if she could be intimate again, which is complete BS. I said the moral man he is, he should have known better. I understand what it's like to have a relationship with somebody at work, but there are lines you don't cross. He was in that bed too. I was pissed and realized how little of a priority I was again. With my kids and my mind, I need to make sure that I'm taking the correct steps to protect myself and them. I told her immediately that Seth needed to find another job. With our industry being very small, he should be able to find one very easily due to the experience that you need. If he doesn't do this, this video is going to go to his work and to his wife. She deserves to know. She said she couldn't ask him to do that. I told her that this decision was both of yours. And how am I supposed to just let everything go without consequences? The world doesn't work like that. She said that she and Seth are not on speaking terms because of what happened. He blames her for what happened. I told her you'd see him at work. I'm sure you can pull him aside. Not my problem. I then began to tell her that she needed to go find a place immediately. She said she had no place to go. I said it was not my problem. I would take the kids to my other family members. But their school is close, and I can't take them that far. There's no immediate family where we live. I told her that I had the upper hand due to the evidence. Why would I be the one that would be forced to leave, as well as Seth getting to keep his job and his marriage intact? I did nothing wrong. I didn't deserve this. She said she didn't know what to do. I said that's not my problem. I explained that her narcissistic tendencies affected me mentally and emotionally through our relationship. She needs to hear it because narcissistic people think they never do anything wrong. She needed to hear everything I had to say in order to become a better person and mother to our kids. But that's the extent of our relationship moving forward. I told her I wasn't your friend anymore and not to bother me with any of her BS. In the past, she knew I was a problem solver and would use her problems to try to gaslight me. I asked her to leave after, but she had no response. I plan to let Seth's wife know, and I want Seth gone from the company first. In order not to affect my kids too much, I don't want Cass's job to be in jeopardy. However, if they don't do what I want, then that's their choice, and they know the consequence. I have contacted a lawyer. We meet in the middle of the week. He will have it all in front of him later. Even things from the past from our relationship. There will be another follow-up as things progress. Second story. My stalker is making my life a misery. He got me evicted, made me lose my job, any social life, and threatened to end me. Police still said they couldn't do anything as he did nothing wrong, and now he broke into my house, so I shot him. For the past 6 months, I have been relentlessly stalked and have had threats against my life made by someone I dated for a month. It started with phone calls of 45-50 a day, 50-page text messages, and him showing up outside of my house at 5 in the morning. When I wouldn't comply or feed the negative attention, I began to receive threats and claims that he would murder me and get away with it. All he would have to do is flee the country, telling me he shouldn't have to force me to be his friend, give him another chance, or anything else. Every time I blocked his number from contacting me, he would then call me from different ones, try and pretend to be other people, have his friends, or sometimes even random strangers he'd ask on the street. I once scared an unsuspecting guy half to death after informing him that the person who had just told him to call me was actually stalking me, and I sent him proof. He ended up calling the police on him. He fled, of course. After about 2 months of that, I was evicted from my apartment building due to my neighbors no longer feeling safe because of his looming presence. I then applied for and was granted a TPO. A few days later, I received a picture message of the note the sheriff's civil had left on the door of my stalkers, then residence with a message taunting me that what you are trying to do was stupid, and a restraining order is just a piece of paper. So ultimately, he just ended up avoiding the process server, and as simple as that, I was not being protected at all. On May 31st of this year, I relocated. This did not deter my stalker. He vowed to find wherever I moved to and threatened that if he couldn't find me, he would be able to find my family, and then proceeded to send me a map of my mother's home, whom he had never met. I received a message from a woman claiming to be my former landlord, letting me know that I owed a balance on my account, and that to avoid late fees, I needed to pay the amount, which I could do with the link provided in the message. It turns out it was my stalker pretending to be a woman, and the link turned out to be a tool used to grab the user's IP address when they clicked the link. Upon this discovery, I changed my phone number and began to systematically dismantle any trace of an online presence I once had. This action only seemed to anger him, and before deleting the profiles outright, I would attempt to block him from contacting me. Each and every time I blocked one, he simply created a new one and proceeded to contact me as if nothing had happened. 12 different Reddit accounts, 9 different Tumblrs, 10 different Instagram accounts, 3 Meetup accounts, 4 Facebook accounts with which he changed his location to that of my hometown, and proceeded to add nearly everyone from my graduating class in high school, and even 3 Duolingo accounts and MySpace. Yes, MySpace. I then received an empty package from him addressed to my former residence with a declaration. Address correction requested. Do not forward. I'm assuming he thought that the post office would adhere to his requests and return the package to him with my new corrected address on it. In mid-July, he created a profile using my photos and likeness to threaten my family. When I didn't respond, he proceeded to post semi-naked pictures of me on the profile in an attempt to blackmail me into speaking with him. I did not, and I contacted Twitter to report the account and have it removed, which they eventually did. On August 21, 2014, I awoke around 8 p.m. to the vigorous knocking and ringing of my doorbell. I looked out my window to see who it was, and I was horrified to see my stalker there. I called the police, and of course he fled once again. Over 7 separate police reports were filed. This incident was followed by threatening emails from my stalker demanding that I meet him somewhere, or because he had found me that next time I would wake up to gunshots, and that if I didn't, he would first taser you and rope you in the arse using your boyfriend's blood as lube. This past Sunday night, I woke up at 6:45 to the ringing and banging again. I proceeded to record him on video while I was on the phone with the police. He fled on foot once again, and I was hit with the same hoopla from law enforcement. Well, we can't really do much because technically, at this point, he's not doing anything wrong. Then why does he flee, I wonder? I obtained a TPO again, but I have no solid address for this dangerous person, which is why I am in dire need of a private investigator to assist with finding said residence, so this person can be served. I hope you might be able to refer me to someone who might be able to assist me. I've developed insomnia, depression, anxiety, and paranoia. I am completely isolated. I am 22 years old, and I have no social life anymore. I have 0 friends. I've become a shell of my former self. I've faced eviction and lost a job because of this man's behavior, and I don't know how much longer I can survive. There's actually so much more filler SHT that he has done to terrorize me. But for the sake of this already lengthy post, I tried to condense it. I have proof in the form of recordings, event diaries, and copies of all of his threats, interactions, and attempts to communicate, and I would be more than willing to email them to show I'm not lying. I am in LV, if that helps at all. TLDR. People overuse the word stalking so much these days that no one takes it seriously anymore. As soon as someone doesn't like someone anymore, they call them a stalker. This isn't staring at your ex's new lover's timeline longer than you healthily should. This is the real scared to sleep at night deal. I have felt the fear before, and it's eating away at me. I need help. Badly. Edit. Whoever has gilded me gold, wow. Thank you so much. As pathetic as it may seem, Redditors and Imgurians have seriously been one of my only sources of comfort and human interaction for the past few months. You've got an idea of how much these communities helped out my constant sadness. I see you, r/WW. You guys seriously rock. Thanks for being here for me. Relevant comments. Commenter. Can you post the video? OP yes. But I'm on the phone with the police during the video. I'm not 100% sure how to blurt out certain information, like my address and my phone number, from the audio in the video. OP comments on September 27th, 3 days later. Commenter. Damn. I remember talking to an old friend of mine from Vegas who was saying she'd get a CCW soon. I kind of think I should forward this to her. Soon just doesn't seem soon enough. OP do it. My gun saved my life. Update. Deleted. Recovered with an image. Image description. A photo of the slightly open door. The chair is in front, pushed to the side. Black paint is covering the side of the door that has been busted in. Arrows most likely from crime scene units are stuck to the door, pointing to individual spots. I'm writing this while staring at the mess the police left for me, in a bit of a fog. After 6 months of stalking and threats against my life, my stalker finally snapped and decided to kick my door in and make good on his promise. Out of fear, the past month I had begun sleeping with a chair propped against my front door to give myself a few extra precious seconds in case of emergency. I shudder to think how differently things might have turned out had I not barricaded the door. I awoke around 1:15 am to the sound of the door giving way after one kick, followed by the sounds of my stalker struggling to dislodge the chair while forcing his way inside. I jumped up and grabbed the gun I've learned to do everything with, even shower with. I stood at the top of my stairs and fired twice, hitting him in the chest. I hear his scream and his disbelief that I'd stood up for myself 0 to 100 in milliseconds. I've never been so afraid in my life. I do not know if he is living, but I do know the police have him, and that's what helps the most. After months of him evading the police, I began to question whether he was unstoppable, untraceable. Houdini, he would murder me and get away with it. As of now, I'm in a haze of guilt, surprise, relief, and disbelief. I shook as the canines dragged him out of his hiding place under a bush. I survived, where so many people do not. Holy SHT, I survived. Edit. The outpouring of support is wild. I can't thank you guys enough. Everyone can be a critic, and the fact still remains. You never know what you will do in a situation until it is presented to you. Those who believe there are other things to be done have never had someone tell you that you no longer deserve to draw breath and mean it. And for the should have fired a warning shot, folks. There are no warning shots. A gun is a deadly force. You only pull that trigger if you are in fear for your life. And all other methods of deterrence are gone. When he kicked my door in, there was no longer a deterrent preventing harm. Warning shots are dangerous and could hurt the unintended. This is not a Wild West movie. That's what responsible gun ownership is. I'll update once things have calmed down a bit, I promise. I'll write back to everyone. And after being isolated for so long, anyone who wants to be friends, I am always accepting of those. Update on the case in 2020. Article text copied below 6 years later. Editor's note. This is 6 years after the original events, but it is the same man. He did this to a different woman in 2019 while on parole. They refer to OP as the former girlfriend in Las Vegas, even though she only went on 2 dates with him. Reno, Nevada man has been sentenced to 15 years in prison after pleading guilty to stalking a female acquaintance while on parole for a similar crime that happened in Las Vegas. The Washoe County District Attorney's Office in Reno announced the sentence for 28-year-old Douglas Eugene Jackson on Friday. Jackson was arrested in Florence, Arizona, in January and pleaded guilty to the aggravated stalking charge in July. According to prosecutors, an investigation by the Sparks Police Department determined Jackson had sent numerous threatening text messages to a woman over several months in 2019. The texts included threats against the woman's dog and property. He also called the woman's family and friends in an effort to get information about her. At the time of the threats, Jackson was on parole for stalking a former girlfriend in Las Vegas. That woman ended up shooting him at her home. Editor's note. This was OP in 2014. He served about 5 years in prison after OP shot him, per the offsearch.doc.nv.gov/website. If you search his name, his details come up. According to the district attorney's office, prosecutor Travis Lucia sought a maximum sentence because of the terrifying nature of Jackson's conduct, which came after only a month on parole for the previous crime. Jackson was living in Washoe County at the time of the threats, but had no steady address. In 2023, a woman on TikTok claimed to be the OP from 2014. There was an article written about that here, text copied below. 9 years later, Deja Washington was 22 years old when she agreed to go on a date with a man. After the second date, she decided she wasn't really feeling it and told him. In a post to TikTok, she has since revealed how just 3 weeks of knowing the man turned into her being stalked for a whopping 7 months. In a video uploaded to her TikTok account Udashitasit, Washington says she had a lot of other stuff going on at the time and explained this to her date, who said it was okay. Washington walked away from the connection, thinking everything was fine. But a month and a half later, the date had very much changed his tune. TikTok/Udashitasit. Washington's date later decided that everything was not fine and began messaging her hundreds of times a day. He argued he was a good man and deserved a chance. At first, I blew it off, and I was kind of annoyed. I was like, who do you think you are? But then it started to get really scary really quickly. He started sending me pictures of the outside of my house, telling me that he was planning a raid. TikTok/Udashitasit. Washington received messages and calls from the man for over a month and started filing police reports. The man took pictures of her doing so and of her talking to the police. Washington explains that he would even talk to strangers and her neighbors, so she couldn't trust anybody. She eventually had to move out of her apartment because a restraining order truly is just a piece of paper, left unable to sleep because he would threaten he was outside and was planning to break in. TikTok/Udashitasit. Washington claims she went to the police 5-10 times and filed like 10 police reports, but says she was told there wasn't anything they could do as he hadn't hurt her. She eventually moved house, but her stalker, who posed as her former landlord, used packages and social media to try to track her down. The man threatened to kill her and said he knew he was going to get away with it because he was a white man and she was a black woman. Washington was later assigned a detective to her case, but the first time she met him, she says he revealed he'd met her stalker, who seemed like a nice guy and suggested it could be a misunderstanding. I knew in that moment this man was going to kill me, and he was going to get away with it. TikTok/Udashitasit. Washington's stalker changed phone numbers and even used Duolingo to try to contact her. And it was when Washington registered to vote that he finally found her address. she resolved to buy a firearm, despite being very anti-gun, after her parents were shot when she was younger. The man kept demanding they meet, threatening if Washington didn't, he would grate her and use her blood as lube, and frequently turned up at her door, dodging police. But suddenly, he went completely quiet. TikTok/you day shit is it. In September, he came for her, kicking her door in. Washington said, "I remember just grabbing my firearm off the table, and I wasn't angry. I wasn't upset. I had just made the decision that it was either him or me, and I chose me. And I shot him." The police later found Washington's stalker. His injuries left him unable to run, and he was sentenced to jail. Washington went on to work at a gun range and took part in Refuse to be a victim courses to help other women feel empowered to protect themselves. She now works at a big tech company and never takes any moment of life for granted. Washington's stalker, Douglas Eugene Jackson, was sentenced to 15 years in prison in 2020.